Now, bukod doon sa diversities, doon sa obvious natin na starting point, no? Speaking of common ground, mayroon actually isang document na pinagkakasunduan ng isang katauhan ng buong sanlibutan. It's a very special document na inuuhan ng practically lahat ng bansa't bayan ng buong daigdig. It's not the Bible, most popular. No? It's also not the Quran. And it's not the Communist Manifesto. What I'm talking about is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's actually a very short document. It consists of a preamble and 30 articles. You can actually finish it in, maybe even less than 10 minutes. So ang question is, nabasa nyo na ba yun? Na-review nyo ba yun? No? Malamang hindi pa. We're not saying though, na dahil sa pinirmahan ito ng lahat, inuuhan ng lahat, basta na lang natin yayakapin din. No, human rights, as you very well know, napaka-controversial ito na term, lalo na dito sa atin. So, ang sinasabi lang natin, bago natin ito ikagagalit o ikalilito, bago natin ito tanggihan o even tanggapin, dapat aralin muna natin ano ba itong ating tinataguyod o tinatanggihan. Fair is fair, diba? Ganun kasi ang totoong edukasyon. Ang edukasyon ay aralin muna bago husgahan. The good thing is, meron tayong website na ang tawag ay 1hr.org. At pagpupunta tayo doon, marami tayong mada-download doon ng mga resources na pwede nating magamit sa ating klase. Isa doon yung crash course na 1 hour. Sa loob ng isang oras, mapapanood natin ang isang video na tinatalakay nito ang Universal Declaration of Human Rights. At yun po yung panonoodin natin ngayon.
"35 years ago, in 1986, Filipinos hogged the world's political center stage in a people power revolution that spectacularly dismantled a dictatorship patently notorious for human rights excesses. For instance, human rights groups cite more than 3,000 extrajudicial killings under martial law over the 10-year period 1975 to 1985. Fast forward 30 years since Marcos fled the country, history repeats itself. This time around, the Filipino people cheer behind 10 times as many state-instigated murders, and approvingly laugh at their president's rape jokes. In all fairness, Filipinos do not have a global monopoly on lack of appreciation for human rights. An international survey, done by the private market research company Ipsos, showed that as high as 40% of the world's adult population admit they know next to nothing about human rights. And by the way, it doesn't stop at 40. In the first quarter of last year alone, the Philippines recorded roughly 270,000 births and 170,000 deaths, further upping the country's population by another 100,000. How do you propose to instruct 500,000 new arrivals every year, on top of the 50 million human rights zombies already in circulation? With the end game in mind that hopefully 2-3 generations after ours, or 50-60 years from now, there will be enough citizens to turn the wheel the other way. 900,000 teachers, handling 30 million students, in 42,000 barangays. That is the scale of the challenge that we face today. What we propose to do are 4 things: clarify, simplify, qualify, so we can quantify. In today's session we shall attempt to demonstrate how to do the first 3. 1. Clarify the meaning. 2. Simplify the teaching. 3. Qualify the issues. In the hope that we can make all 3 to come together nicely, and pass the knowledge quickly enough onto an ample quantity. Thank you for joining us today. Our first video follows shortly.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights contains 30 articles and a preamble. As its title implies, it concerns all human beings, meaning every single person on Earth. It was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948. Yet until now, more than 70 years since, human rights abuses continue to abound all over the world. Apparently, human rights are not that well understood by many humans. One major reason is because human rights as a subject is not formally taught in school, not in primary or secondary, not even in college. At least not here in our country. And also probably because it's often intimidating to the average person when lawyers and academic experts do the explaining. That is why we put together what we call the UDHR wall flag. The intention is for the wall flag to be displayed on walls of homes and schools. That way, children get to be familiar with its icons as they grow up, making it easier for teachers and parents to explain to them the human rights ideas that these child-friendly symbols stand for. By the way, none of us is a high government official, or corporate executive, or ranking member of a political party, much less a religious leader. In short, we're just like your typical community. Now, why is that important? Because our theory is, perhaps if it is non-experts doing the explaining to non-experts, they might actually get to understand each other better. And if we can explain human rights in a way that the average teacher or parent can just as well do themselves, then we may be able to reach out more effectively to most everybody. Well, we'll see. There was this very smart person, I think his name was William Shakespeare, who summarized human rights in, believe it or not, 6 short words. So to begin, I'd like to borrow those 6 words from Hamlet. To be or not to be. That is the basic idea. In Article 13, for example, it says that everyone has the right to stay in one place and live there, as well as to move around. Residence and travel. To stay where you want to stay. To be where you are, to do what you do, to be who you are. To remain at your station, to maintain your status, to embrace and hold on to your identity. Or not to stay. To go where you prefer to go, to change jobs, to do something else. To choose to be what you wish to be. Identity and mobility. On one hand, you have the right to remain as you are, who you are, where you are, what you do, where you belong. On the other hand, you also have the freedom to alter your situation. To change, to decide otherwise, to prefer something else, to determine for yourself which way to go. To be or not to be, or think, or believe, or speak, or do. To be or not to be, whatever makes you truly happy. I know, it sounds too good to be true. So who would care to confer to you, to assure you and guarantee you all those freedoms and rights? And why would they think of doing so? Okay, let's start with who. As hard as it is to imagine, it's actually the handiwork of the governments of the world. Records say they sat together one day and called themselves the United Nations. And for some reason, they agreed to come up with a universal creed that guaranteed a common set of human rights for one and all. Not only that, they even made a pact and pledged to each other, we'll take care of the rights of our own people, you look after yours. Can you believe that? Notorious governments of the world caring about people's rights. In any case, what if you're not a citizen of any country? Like millions of people, by the way. So they even came up with a special article to say, everyone has got to have the right to a nationality. Article 15, the right to have rights, as it is often called. So next time you fill up a form that says in their citizenship or nationality, you might want to think of it this way. They just need to know which government is responsible for your human rights. Of course, Article 15 also says, you're free to change nationalities. Want to remain a Filipino? It's your Pepino. Want to change citizenship? That's okay too. It's neither treason nor betrayal to your country if you do. It's your human right, and you owe no explanation to any who. To be or not to be, it's all right up to you. And since you're a citizen of your nation, even without the Universal Declaration, I'm sure you've got rights enshrined in your Constitution. Like the right to peaceful assembly and to form associations, just like it says in Article 20. Again, of course, you can't be compelled against your wishes to be a member of an organization. To join or not to join, it's your tenderloin. A perfect fit with Article 21, the right to actively get involved in politics and public affairs. Maybe run for public office. or not. To vote for this party or not. For this candidate or not. Or for another. Or not even vote at all. It's your right, including the right to exercise it or not. Isn't that cool? But what happens if your government fails to protect your rights? Or even worse, what if it's your own government that violates your human rights? Let's say you've decided to be a journalist. That is of course your right to work and to choose what kind of profession you want to pursue, Article 23. And right beside it is just the right kind of right you need for the job. Article 19, the right to seek and share information, as well as the freedom to hold and express opinions, which, let's say in your case, often happens to offend humorless public officials. And so you find yourself in grave danger of being arrested, detained, tortured, maybe even killed. Of course, whether journalist, whistleblower or athlete, you wouldn't seek protection from a murderous administration. So what can you do? That's one reason why they had to put an Article 14 in there too, the right of persons persecuted in their own country to seek asylum in another. And if things go your way, securing your rights now becomes the immediate lookout of that other state. Particularly Article 3, your right to life. And Articles 4 and 5, your right to protection from servitude and cruelty. Your, shall we say, existential rights quartet, because when you stop breathing, it will be difficult for you to enjoy your other rights, like suffrage or free speech. Unless maybe you're from a country where democracy is so alive, even dead people get to vote. Seriously, providing sanctuary to people in grave danger implies that defending the rights of all people, wherever they're from, is the duty of all the nations of the world. In a real sense, it makes everyone a global citizen. After all, we all live in one planet. Exactly like how Article 6 puts it, everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. And that, further equally entitles all human beings to all these legal rights, all the way down to Article 11. Equal protection before the law, Article 7. Protection from arbitrary arrest, Article 9. Judicial remedy if your rights are violated, Article 8. Presumption of innocence, Article 11. Full equality to an impartial public hearing, Article 10. Incidentally, if you took even a quick scan of the articles, it's hard to miss the persistent emphasis on equality, mentioned over and over again, throughout the entire Declaration. Particularly in Article 2. Most especially Article 2. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration, it proclaims without any hesitation, without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. In short, all rights for all. But why stress equality? Well, declaration and human are self-explanatory. It's the two other words, universal and rights, that are a little tricky. And those two, together, hold the key. On one end, as we said, rights are freedoms, to be or not to be. At the other end, universal, is like the sail and sailboat, or handshake in a deal. The human rights cause is partial and undone, until it caters to all, universally. Meaning that if it isn't in there already, you are welcome to add. Everyone is equally entitled to Article 3, life, liberty and security. Everyone is equally entitled to Article 4, protection from slavery. Everyone is equally entitled to Article 5, freedom from torture. And so forth. And so therefore, to Shakespeare's 6, we need to add 2 to get the full picture. To be or not to be for all. That's all there is to it really. In principle, it's that simple. The difficult part is how to operationalize to be or not to be for everybody in the real world. And this is the part where equality fits into the whole equation. Human rights will only work for all human beings in a fair and equitable society. Otherwise, if you are simply free to be or not to be, without considering how your choices might affect me, your actions are bound to deprive others of equally enjoying their rights and freedoms, just like you get to enjoy yours. Now, if you look at it that way, we don't actually need 8 words to unravel the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Nor even 6. Not even 2. 1 word would suffice to adequately summarize all 30 articles. Of course, that word is equality. You can very well say human rights is just another fancy way of saying equality. We might as well call it the UDE, or Universal Declaration of Equality. In fact, it seems like the drafters of the Declaration shared this view and decided to settle the matter right away, at the very first opportunity. Article 1, Sentence 1. All human beings, they concluded without even bothering to explain, are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And just like that, each and every person on the planet instantly became equal. Which, of course, we all know from experience, isn't exactly true. Or as George Orwell more truthfully puts it, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Maybe if they said all ought to be equal, that'd probably be closer to Earth's orbit. Simply because, in an equitable solar system, everybody stands a better chance at having a better life. Then more young people can go to school and the planet will have more biologists, physicists, physicians, teachers, farmers, brewers, Olympians, writers, engineers, filmmakers, architects and geniuses in all fields of human undertakings. And hopefully fewer bureaucrats and bankers. Yes, by all means, let's have an equitable world. Again, because in a fair and just society, knowledge and comprehension get to advance and increase in ways that benefit people equitably. That, I imagine we can all happily come to terms with. But to begin by claiming that all are born equal in dignity and rights. Do you think that actually helps?
All right. I hope you are having a good day. Normally, this session takes about an hour and a half because of the 15 or so minutes of discussion between videos. But because we are on speed mode, we're going to do this session within 1 hour. So we're going to simulate a typical discussion that similar to what you might want to do in class if you're a teacher or at home. Rhoda and I'm Gary. We're going to facilitate the discussion. We will be joined online by Caitlin.
Hi.
By Cielo.
Hello.
And with Tesha. Hello, everybody. Okay. The goal is to present human rights in a way that is easy to understand. Easy to follow, but not shallow. Something like that. So, first question. Was that video easy enough for everybody to sort out, to make sense of?
Ako, I think so. I think so. Madali naman siyang sundan. I teach high school, although hindi pala English yung mga estudyante. Madali lang namang sundan yung mga sentences at saka yung storyline. So I think easy enough.
Ako interesado din ako dito kasi I happen to look after a nephew whose parents are out of the country. So it involves a lot of tutoring, no. Khalil is 8 years old and I'm quite sure na hindi ganito yung mga videos na fond of siya or na masaya siyang panoorin. Pero ang feeling ko yung poster or yung wall flag, as you call it, yung wall flag. Thank you. Yung wall flag hanging on a wall in the house, I think that could work, yung lagi niya makikita. Probably not just with him, but with everybody, I think. So, as a conversation piece din, pwede, for starters.
For me, the difficult part is breaking in the topic because human rights isn't exactly something that young people like my own friends normally talk about. So yeah, the wall flag can help raise the subject up. Also, if people see them all over the place, I think that could break the ice. So definitely yes, the way human rights are explained in the video are easy to comprehend so far and yet quite solid and substantive.
I think the idea, though, is not to let the children attend the review themselves, but for the parents, the teachers, the older members of the family. The hope is that making human rights understandable for them can make human rights understandable for their own children and students, as well as, of course, their friends and people in their circles.
Okay, so anything else anybody wishes to bring up?
Ay, ako sana. Dun sa last part ng video, should human rights education begin with the official announcement that all people are born equal, no? Kasi ako tingin ko hindi siya nakakatulong. Kasi parang fake news siya sa madaming tao everywhere, no? And siguro, I think the more credible way ay i-acknowledge na there are in fact heaves of grave disparities in the world that ought to be justly corrected, and that the human rights cause could contribute much to help make that happen.
As a teacher, I couldn't agree more with Caitlin, no? Pero sa pakikisalamuha ako sa mga magulang, they tend to respond more to religious truths rather than observable information. So, yung mga motherhood statements, gaya ng we are created in the image of God, God of mercy and compassion, do generate more traction. So, that could work, di ba?
So I guess whatever works. Okay, but hold on to your thoughts. Perhaps you should proceed to the next video and continue this conversation afterwards.
This session of UDHR 101 is part 2 of 3 parts. If you haven't done part 1 yet, please do that one first, thank you. Now to continue. Whether or not you're convinced all are born free and equal, maybe the more important question is whether or not equality is a good thing in itself. Does it have a practical use in our everyday lives, to begin with? That one at least is an easy one. Studies abound pointing to the fact that the more equitable a society is, the better the overall quality of life of its population. And speaking of to begin with, the UDHR, while far from perfect, is arguably the broadest consensus ever attained by humanity in modern history. So if the objective is global understanding and cooperation, it makes sense to begin with a common ground that's most acceptable to everybody. If we started with the Apostles' Creed, that would exclude atheists and Muslims and other non-Christians right away. Same thing if we began with the Quran. And maybe even more so, if our working draft were the Communist Manifesto. It's neither superior nor inferior to other ideologies, but the UDHR is a doctrine that many traditions say they can at least live with. Conservatives, liberals, militants, reformists, capitalists and socialists, even anarchists, support, or at least don't openly oppose, the Declaration. Lastly, since it's governments footing the bill, it comes with practical advantages like national, regional and global, organizational, political and material infrastructures, presumably at UN's disposal to expedite the aims of the Declaration. Good enough for me, I hope that's fair enough for you too. Alright then. In part 1, we said human rights were universal, that they applied to all. But besides involving all human beings, human rights are also universal, in that they concern the totality, the universality, of the human story. In other words, human rights have something to do with the whole universe of becoming and being human. With all of life, if you want. Let's say you're bored with people and wish to be left alone in your house, or in your room, or headset, and don't care much about your right to travel or to associate with others, at least not for the moment. Even in your solitude, in your most intimate spaces, your human rights operate. Your privacy is a universal right, Article 12. Your home, your quarters, your desk, your files, accounts, messages, correspondences, your secrets, passwords, your calendar, notes, journals. They may not be intruded, without your express permission, nor your honor and reputation maliciously or unjustly attacked. But if you're happy to let the world know what you had for lunch on Facebook or Twitter, you're free to do that too, it's all up to you. To keep or not to keep to yourself, it's your stuff, it's your thing, it's your right. Ah, but you say, surely human rights can't have anything to do with my love life, right? Wrong. Not just your love life, but your married life and your family life. Article 16, you have the right to marry and found a family. Of course, with the consent of the spouses. To wed or not to wed, you can't be forced to settle down with somebody against your will. Oh well, maybe you're right. The right to marry doesn't actually require love, only free will. Incidentally, love or no love, things that you privately own, as well as wealth that comes with marital union, or your family wealth, and properties you get to acquire in association with others, are recognized and protected in the Declaration as your right to property. And that's Article 17. I'm personally not a big fan of this article. If we're talking about things in your drawer and closet, or workstation and personal library, professional tools and gears, maybe even a reasonably comfortable house, or local diner, or even a small farm, fine. But allowing individuals and families and private corporations to possess and control major facilities that are critical to society's well-being, in my view, fundamentally contradicts the Declaration's intent and vision. Intergenerational poverty is not going away as long as intergenerational wealth monopoly stands in the way. It's a heartbreaker of an article, but perhaps the point is, instead of consecrating the Declaration, much like how movements tend to sanctify their truths, better to take up and take on the human rights cause with ever-critical and self-critical mindset. In any case, regarding yet another amazing facet of being human, the realm of the Declaration isn't merely confined to our physical surroundings. Right above the right to privacy on our UDHR wall flag is Article 18, your freedom of thought and faith, as well as the right to share and practice your beliefs with others. Or not, if you prefer to do it alone. And again, why of course, you are free to change religions as your conscience dictates and as fast as you can say hallelujah. Come to think of it, whatever happens with the world, you are absolutely free to think of anything, from the silliest ideas to the remotest reaches of your imagination. After all, that's how human ingenuity gets to invent new things for generations to marvel at and enjoy. And when people come up with new things, they get to be regarded as authors of their creations. Whether a poem, novel, or lyrics of a song, a genetic modification, an operating system, a technological device, brand or logo, whether as musical arranger, game developer, mobile application code programmer, choreographer, fashion designer, photographer, animator. All of them are creators, all authors. And as authors, they get to own what is called the copyright of their creations, as described in Article 27. 27, however, has a more enlightened intent. Section 2 deals with intellectual property, yes. But Section 1 unambiguously lays out its genuinely universal context. Everyone has the right freely, it asserts, to enjoy the arts and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. There it is again, universal equal treatment and opportunity. As a matter of fact, right after 27, Article 28 reiterates the point for the nth time. Everyone is entitled to an international order in which this declaration can be fully realized. Of course, in real life, it's a different story altogether. As technology and the arts advance, the gap between rich and poor forever widens. It's hard to imagine how, for instance, equal right to privacy works between human beings who live in mansions and human beings who eat and sleep on the streets. Which makes Article 22, the right to social security, indispensable in upholding human dignity. Article 22 settles the case with finality. That peace, justice, and unity are empty words without the universal guarantees of social safety and personal well-being and upliftment. Together with Article 25, aptly right next to each other in the wall flag, these two, in our view, are defining moments in the Declaration. It is reassuring to see the primacy of Social Security wrapped and sealed in Article 22. And even more compelling unpacked and revealed in the language of human needs in Article 25. Food, clothing, medical care, housing, social services, sickness, security in the event of unemployment, widowhood, disability, lack of livelihood. And as the author of this essay quips, there's even one they made specially just for me. Old age. All these are human rights. Curiously, Article 25 did not simply end there. It has a Section 2 that is no less important too, if out of the blue. Motherhood and childhood, it seems to want to make sure, are entitled to special care and assistance. Interesting. Up till this point, the Declaration talked about everyone, all or no one. Except in Article 16 understandably, because you cannot marry everyone, all or no one. So why the sudden break in the pattern? Why single out a specific group of people? What's going on here? Now is probably a good time to look into our other earlier question as to why the UN thought of putting together a universal human rights standards. 1945 was a sobering year. Germany surrendered to the Allies in May. 3 months afterwards, Japan followed suit after the infamous bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 15 million soldiers perished and another 25 million were wounded in battle in World War II. But the civilian casualties were even greater due to disease, starvation, torture, forced labor, genocide, mass executions and indiscriminate bombings. Talking of civilians, there's empirical evidence of a correlation between war and maternal mortality, meaning mothers dying while giving birth. But it doesn't take elaborate research for most of us, everyday folks, to see that women and children are particularly vulnerable in situations of armed conflict. I'm guessing that's the reason why they had to make that case in Section 2 of Article 25. For that matter, we thought it fitting to include the atom bomb in the UDHR wall flag to depict its historical context. And as a reminder that the instruments of war and the horrors they inflict make no distinction between offense or defense, let alone combatants and unarmed civilians. In October of the same year, the United Nations was established. And the business of putting together what would later officially become the UDHR was taken up at the first session of the UN General Assembly. Obviously, the pressing motive in drafting the declaration was to prevent, heaven forbid, World War III. But why wait until after the Second World War? Why didn't they come together after the first and drafted a declaration that would have prevented the second? Oh, but they did. Before the United Nations, that was founded after World War II, there was the League of Nations, founded after the First World War. With the exact same immediate goal, which is to prevent another world war. Obviously it failed and had to pass on its best hopes over to its new improved rightful heir, as it were. But why did it fail? The proponents of the League of Nations argued that, to prevent war, you need to enforce peace. How do you enforce peace? By preventing aggression. And how do you prevent aggression? By making the price of aggression too high for the would-be aggressor. How? By convincing everybody that an assault against one is an assault against all. As if to say, if you hurt me, the rest of the world will turn against you, so you had better not. As pragmatic as they sound, the political unity of the mightiest armies and most advanced technologies in the most prosperous economies of the most powerful nations of the world, put together, could not prevent a second world war. Perhaps the framers of the declaration came to consider, given what happened, that peace must be made of some other stuff. Could it be some genetic or moral or spiritual fiber, without which no amount of negotiations, compromise, or intimidation would suffice for our species to hope to prevail and prosper in plurality? Whatever it is and however they got there, they arrived at the other motherhood statement of the Declaration. If you remember, the first one was Article 1, Sentence 1, all are born equal in dignity and rights. The second is right on cue, Sentence 2. All are endowed with reason and conscience. And for that reason, the peoples of the world are up to the task of ever keeping ablaze the torch of dignity and solidarity. In other words, reason, conscience, empathy, must make up the human DNA. Question is that assessment consistent with humanity's record of history?
All right, so that's video number 2, and we have time to spare before the third and last one. Anyone? Anything?
Alright. About halfway through na po tayo dun sa ating 1-hour video. Tigil muna natin dito. tayo naman ang mag-uusap. No? Pakinggan natin ang isa't isa. Kung meron kayong gustong may tanong, may sabi, magdagdag, whatever. Let's give everybody the opportunity.
ako na-appreciate ko yung yung neat order nung parade nung rights kasi mas accessible siya, no? Gusto ko rin yung approach na yung philosophy is not the focus. I don't feel being asked to have faith in human rights, pero na-consider ko yung social viability of its propositions.
Sa akin, very instructive na diniscuss yung UDHR in historical context. Although, medyo mabigat balik-aralan yung World War I and II na katulong for me to make the connection. Ang UDHR, hindi siya set of legal instrumentalities na para lang sa mga lawyers at experts i-interpret. Ang UDHR shared hope ng lahat ng tao sa buong daigdig.
And we wonder why it seems that majority of the Filipinos disdain the term human rights like a dreaded disease.
Bukod kasi sa walang systematic education, di nakakatulong na yung government pa mismo yung nang tatag sa mga human rights advocates. So ang tingin talaga ng publiko sa human rights, bad news siya. Di ba? Na anti-government, na kapag human rights worker ka, leftist, anti-government, so di talaga nakakatulong.
The wall flag actually looks very cool. I'm thinking maybe one way of engaging young people is to design games around it. Maybe like a board game or gaming programs utilizing the icons and the connecting bars as seen on the wall flag. Are those things downloadable?
Yeah. You can download the wall flag, soft copy, copies of the wall flag, either in horizontal layout or vertical. And you can even download the individual icons. You can make posters out of them, write specific posters if you want. And of course, turn them into games, design games around them. Sure. Yeah.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
And actually, I think going back to the most immediate basic, I think even more fundamental than the UDHR review, the first order of the day is to make clouds rain, UDHR wall flags everywhere. So we probably need printing presses, paper supply, distribution routes, and a massive information drive.
We're going to need Cambridge Analytica. So before we get serious, maybe we should proceed to the next video.
Yeah.
That's our third and last video. Okay, so we'll make sure we're gonna do this within the hour.
We're on the third and final part of the UDHR Wall Flag Basic Orientation course. Again, in case you haven't yet, I suggest you view parts 1 and 2 first, thank you. Now to continue. For those of you who are unconvinced that human beings are endowed with reason and conscience, as Article 1 claims, perhaps you might find some consolation in the fact that, while certainly far from a perfect record, we haven't had a world war in the last 75 years since the first session of the UN General Assembly in 1946. I hope that's good enough reason for both believers and skeptics to keep hoping against hope. Let's go for 100. Here in part 3, we're going to have an exam. 5 items, 20 points each. Ready? Okay, item number 1. Consider the term economic, social, and cultural rights in Article 22. Some of you may be familiar with the categories civil and political rights, as opposed to economic, social, and cultural rights, CPR and ESCR. But where do you draw the line? There's actually no mention of the term civil and political rights in the Declaration. So let's see how these various human rights behave in real time in the real world. For instance, to go out and vote, or join a march, you need to activate your right to travel. And to do that sensibly, you need to secure your right to food first, and have breakfast. Make sure you have a little pocket money that you presumably earned, thanks to your right to work. And all the while, you're lugging a backpack, where you keep a shirt for changing, and other personal stuff, that are protected by your right to privacy. Then again, before any and all of that can happen, you've got to be a healthy, living, breathing human being. Which means, first and foremost, your right to life had better be in good order. Human rights are obviously interrelated. And to help complete our UDHR picture, Article 13 is your freedom of abode and travel or physical mobility. Right under it is 27, your parallel right to technological and cultural mobility. Similarly, Article 19, the right to information. Right below it is Article 26, your right to education, dynamic duo for intellectual mobility. So is Article 23, right to work. Your ticket to economic mobility. Directly underneath it, Article 24, right to rest and play. Can't have one without the other. Can't have one without the other 29. Can't have all 29 except one. It's got to be all 30. Just like how Article 30 says it. You cannot use one part of the Declaration to contravene another part of the Declaration. So, quiz number 1. Does it make sense to make a distinction between civil and political versus economic, social, and cultural rights? And should one take precedence over the other? Item number 2. Through the years, there had been landmark international covenants passed in the UN in pursuit of the ideals of the 1948 Declaration. The Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, signed in 1965. The two standard references, the International Covenants on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, and Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, ICESCR, both signed in 1966. Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, 1979. Against torture, 1985. Rights of the Child, 1989. Rights of Persons with Disabilities, 2007. There are even some that deal with groups not mentioned in the Declaration. Protection of Migrant Workers, 1990. There's no mention of migrant workers in the UDHR. Convention Against Transnational Crime, in 2000, no such thing in there either. Protection from Enforced Disappearances, 2007, you can't find desaparecidos in the Declaration. Rights of Indigenous Peoples, in the same year, again, there's no mention of Indigenous peoples in UDHR. This is the genius of Rockstar Article 25. Right, the one which had Section 2, on special care for motherhood and childhood, if you remember. It's as if the drafters were concerned that in the future the Declaration becomes merely a relic from the past. So they whipped up a futuristic third universal dimension. Universality across space-time. That way, the Declaration gets to evolve hand in glove with history itself. And Article 25 Section 2 serves as a customizable template of equity and rights moving forward at every turn and frontier of the human adventure. To settle the matter, once and for all time, that specially vulnerable people, at any juncture in history, rightfully deserve special equalizing care and assistance. And so now we've come to understand that the Declaration is three ways universal. It's universally relevant. 1. To all people. 2. In all areas of life. 3. For all time. Even as we speak, diverse groups of people are pressing for protection, inclusion, and equal rights over concerns that were not as prominent back then when they drafted the Declaration. Data privacy, gene therapy, assisted death, safe abortion, contraception, LGBT rights, same-sex union, climate change, GMO research, vaccination, social media. Many of these issues are often contentious and tough to sort out, needless to say. So even among earnest human rights advocates, sometimes you get to hear things like, "That's not in the Declaration, that's not what we signed up for." So, quiz number 2. What will help the human rights cause better, to stick to the original text, or to keep up with what's next?
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Item number 3. Okay. Your plane is about to take off, and a recording reminds you that in case of an emergency, you're to put on your oxygen mask first, before helping a child in your care. Which actually makes sense. By the same token, government can say it needs to secure itself first, so it can secure the rights of its citizens. But what if government claims there are elements among the population seeking to destabilize the country? And to contain the threat, it needs to initiate emergency measures, suppress dissent, curtail free speech, ban organized protests, arrest instigators and suspected sympathizers, disregard due process, for the sake of saving the republic. In fact, it's an old script of authoritarian regimes worldwide. It even has its own international name. National Security Doctrine. Like a shapeshifter, it assumes many forms, such as civic-minded programs like forming civilian paramilitary force multipliers. Or as legislation, like the anti-terror law. Or mobilizing regulatory agencies and depository banks to pry into the finances of nonprofits. Or red tagging of left-leaning organizations critical of the administration. Or even a seemingly convenient national ID system that tracks the whereabouts of people at the expense of their right to privacy and freedom of movement. Again, all in the interest of national security. What is there to secure anyway? To qualify as a nation-state, you need to have a self-governing bunch of people who are able to secure for themselves some territory. You need 4 things then: citizens, sovereignty, territory, and government of the day. So, quiz number 3, when government officials invoke national security, what do you suppose they mean to secure primarily? 1. Its citizens' safety. 2. The nation's sovereignty. 3. The country's territory. 4. Or government's grip on power and political profitability.
I signed Proclamation number 1081, placing the entire Philippines under martial law.
Item number 4. Now the matter concerning non-state actors involves one fact and one supposition. The fact is, the signatories to the declaration and the covenants that it spawned are state actors. Governments acting in behalf of their respective countries. The supposition is, states are the logical signatories, since they're the most powerful social institutions. Just like Spider-Man says, with great power comes great duty. And therefore the great human rights equation comes down to P equals RH, S equals DB. People are rights holders, states are duty bearers. But what about non-state actors that nonetheless exert considerable influence over populations? What about corporations and tech giants, many of which manage assets even larger than GDPs of small countries? What about the church? What about universities? What about mass media conglomerates? What about private commercial unibanks, venture capital, fintechs, oil companies, big pharma, market monopolies? On the other hand, what about revolutionary forces and separatist armies, social movements, political parties, international NGOs, funding agencies, microfinance CSOs? And how about the power of parents over their children, teachers over students, bosses over subordinates, civic leaders on community members, preachers to believers, popular influencers over their followers? What about quiz number 4? Should non-state entities be excused from assuming responsibility for protecting human rights because they are not contracting parties to the declaration? Or are they to be held accountable by virtue of having sizable influence and discretion? Before we proceed to our 5th and last item, let's get you at least one turn to ask a frequently asked question. Why not just neatly arrange the icons from Article 1 straight to 30? No mystery there. Just so you can easily locate your holy trinity of political rights in blue. Fantastic 4 existential rights in green. Motherhood statements in gold at both ends. Statutory rights in yellow. Incidentally, we put Article 9 before 8, because an offense normally happens before its remedy. And number 11 before number 10, because one is presumed innocent before trial, not after. Now, in contrast with these rigid, dura lex, legal and political rights, your personal spaces, in orange, converge with your social avenues, in pink, to build your community square. Of course, at the heart of the community is our rainbow-propelled, kick-ass Article 25. Meanwhile, between state and community, you have your purple, free to do, free to say, free to go, free to stay, fundamental freedoms. Yes, all in all, 30 articles and a preamble. Of course, it's just one way of doing it. You are most welcome to adopt it, or not. You might want to mix and match it, your way. Or ask your students to come up with their own design and try and explain why. Alright, one more and we're done. We know that the Declaration enumerates the universal rights of all people, as a matter of duty primarily of the states, and logically rightly so. However, our last stop, Article 29, flips that logic over and says, you know what? There's actually somebody even more powerful than all these governments. The bearer of all duty bearers, and consequently even more supremely accountable. In a democratic society, by its very definition, where does power truly reside? Correct. In the people. Meaning that the fate of the people is ultimately in their hands. In the final analysis, people's rights are protected only to the extent that they are determined to defend them. Conversely, freedoms are trampled upon when communities refuse to stand up to perpetrators. Like how? Like when their own government sets out to harm the citizens they are sworn to protect, and yet the people themselves applaud and cheer their abusers on. Like when people oppose those who fight for their rights. Or when human rights activists themselves mistake each other for liability. Like when people fail themselves. In many parts of the world today, that seems to be the popular story. Perhaps partly because those who know better may have faltered in helping inform and educate the public about their rights as citizens and as human beings. Our hope is that many more of us will get to pass on this little parable to young people. So that perhaps 40, 50, 60 years from now, the students of our students and our children's children will get to tell a different story. Do you think you can do that? That's our quiz number 5. Thank you for joining us today. Take good care of each other. I hope to see you again in my other classes. Bye.
Hold on to your thoughts for 30 seconds, if you may. If you like, a laminated glass enclosed and framed in solid wood version of the UDHR wall flag can be purchased at Shareware House stores. It is designed to last at least 50 years. That way, if this project doesn't work, you nevertheless get yourself a neat-looking poster to show your grandchildren what doesn't work. Alright, back to work.
All right, back to work. So, anybody want to tackle any one or two of the quizzes?
Yung sa quiz number 2, tingin ko umpisa pa lang na-anticipate na nung mga framers nung declaration na magkakaroon ng pagkakaiba-iba sa interpretasyon. Halimbawa, dun sa Article 16, yung description ng marriage doon. Sabi, men and women have equal rights. Hindi naman sinabing marriage between man and woman. So, yun. Maganda siguro, tignan siya na, yung parang, walang basagan ng grip. Basta yung masaya ka, masaya ako, kahit magkakaiba tayo ng, sa inuman, di ba? Magkakaiba naman yung trip inumin ng mga tao. Basta lahat tayo masaya at walang naapakang mga karapatan. Basta, ayun, mutual happiness support platform. Ganun.
Mutual happiness.
Yeah, that sounds really cool, but it's not as easy when in real life. Like for instance, the debate between life and choice, I don't see in any foreseeable future of it being resolved. But I think the spirit of that adapting to the times is the willingness to continue to talk about the thorniest of issues. That gives us hope.
Ako dun sa quiz number 1, I think yes and no. Yes kasi nakakatulong na yung civil and political rights ay distinguished from economic, social, and cultural rights kasi in-involve na yung distinct sets of mechanisms or agencies of interventions. For one thing, parang you need lawyers or paralegals in effectively defending statutory rights and civil liberties, fine. Whereas putting together a feeding program or a daycare school, for example, in a village, involves a different set of actors, offices, and processes. On the other hand, otherwise you'll need one health worker, one nutritionist, one security guard, and one lawyer to pay one visit to one prisoner. So perhaps a better approach is viewing human rights in the context of a human community. Parang that way, the freedoms and well-being of individuals are seen to indicate and reflect the larger social realities in the community. So, and conversely as well.
Yeah, it's like feed one mouth, food for many. Oh, and here's one from the Dalai Lama. He said, peace can only last where human rights are respected, where the people are fed, and where nations and individuals are free.
Hallelujah.
That's beautiful.
Well, for me, it's something over which we can reasonably all agree. I may have some issue with the sweeping generality, or at least that's how I see quiz number 3. More governments ought to assume prime responsibility on account of the sheer weight they carry. All centers of power share proportionate duty. So I ought to insist, the bigger the bully, the greater the duty, the graver the penalty.
Siguro baka may pag-asa tayo sa local government level. Kasi mas malapit yun sa mga tao parang yung mga local government officials, sila yung nasa ground, mas nakikita nila, mas nakikita nila yung pinagdadaanan ng mga constituents nila. So mas kikilos sila, mas compelled silang kumilos. Siguro mas maayos, mas matino. Small is beautiful.
And we just have enough time for our closing song. This was made by our friends and Filipino singers and musicians. Thank you everybody and take care. Enjoy your day.
Sa isang bayani ang nakipagdigma,
nanilimot ng sarili niyang bansa. Minsan pa ang inani ay mga pangungutya,
ngunit di nito ni minsan ininda.
Huwag kang mag-asang napapurihan,
dawat ng lungsod kung may lungsod.
Huwag malunod na kapangyarihan,
bayad ng lingkod ang maglingkod.
Kung mamumuno ka rin lang, gawing tungtungan ang hadlang. Tuloy ang laban ng iyong ninuno, kung mamumuno ka rin lang.
Kung mangunguna ka rin lang, dapat unahin ang madla. Nahuhuli na, gawin mong una, kung mangunguna ka rin lang.
Ituwid sa tamang kwenta, ang kwenta na mali. Impluwensya'y huwag ibenta, sa may bentang iwali. At kung nasa posisyon, huwag kapit upo. Ilaan ang profesyon, sa halip na ilako.
Kung ang tungkuling walang nagbabantay, nang di magkandaduling sa kakaanhay.
Ang publikong kapiling sa pagpapanyay ng pambansang habilin, ang kakapantay-pantay.
Kung mangunguna ka rin lang,
Huwaran ang tapat,
dapat unahin ang madla.
pagtularan ng lahat,
Huli na,
pagpapagal,
una, kung mangunguna ka rin lang.
kung mamumuno ka rin lang.
Tulong silungan na taba,
Gawing tungtungan ang hadlang.
tulong na alay sa iba. Ang sipag tiyaga,
Kung
di
nimuno,
magawa.
kung mamumuno ka rin lang.
Kung mangunguna ka rin lang,
Unang huwaran ang tapat,
dapat unahin ang madla.
pagtularan ng lahat,
Huli na,
pagpapagal,
una, kung mangunguna ka rin lang.
kung mamumuno ka rin lang.
Tulong silungan na taba,
Gawing tungtungan ang hadlang.
tulong na alay sa iba. Ang sipag tiyaga,
Kung
di
ninuno,
magawa.
kung mamumuno ka rin lang.
Kung mamumuno ka rin lang.
I hope you enjoyed that one. Yun pong mga tumugtog, kumanta, mga volunteers din po yun ng ating community. And one other good news, yun pong Universal Declaration of Human Rights, mayroon po yung Android mobile app. Meron dito sa 1HR, actually may link dito sa 1hr.org. It says you download Wall Flag app from Play Store. Pwede ninyong ma-install sa inyong mga mobile devices. Ituturo po sa atin ng ating facilitator.